5 crazy moments in history you won't learn anywhere else. No. 5. Tankman. On June 5, 1987, a lone man stood in the middle of a tank in Tiananmen Square. As the People's Liberation Army approached him, he defiantly held up a bouquet of flowers. This unforgettable image of the so-called Tankman has become one of the most iconic symbols of resistance to tyranny. But who was this mysterious man and what happened to him? Despite countless theories and speculation, virtually nothing is known about the Tankman's true identity or what ultimately became of him. The only clue we have to his identity is that his name may have been Wang Wai, a dissident who was executed 2 weeks after the Tiananmen Square protests were crushed. No. 4. Vasili. In October 1962, the world stood on the brink of nuclear disaster as the Cuban Missile Crisis reached its climax. With Soviet nuclear missiles now installed on the island of Cuba just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, the Americans were preparing for a full-scale invasion. But it was at this moment of maximum peril that a little-known Soviet Navy captain named Vasili Arkhipov prevented mutually assured destruction. When the Soviet ships carrying the missiles reached international waters off the coast of Cuba, American U-2 spy planes began dropping depth charges in an attempt to force them to the surface. It was at this point that Captain Arkhipov, who was in charge of the nuclear launch codes, realized that a confrontation between the superpowers was imminent. Knowing that any attempt to stop the Americans would likely result in a nuclear strike, Arkhipov instead ordered his crew to surface and to release the missiles into the sea. His courageous decision prevented a nuclear holocaust and saved countless lives. No. 3. The Cadaver Synod. In 1377, the papacy was thrown into chaos when Pope Gregory XI died suddenly and unexpectedly. The cardinals gathered in Rome to elect a new pope, but they couldn't agree on a successor. For the next 3 years, the cardinals were locked in a bitter struggle, with several of them resorting to bribery and even murder in order to secure the papacy for themselves. Eventually, the conclave was broken up and the cardinals went home. But the conflict over the papacy was far from over. In 1384, a group of Italian nobles known as the Corsini family bribed a group of French cardinals and declared their candidate, Pope Urban VI. The French cardinals then traveled to Avignon and formally accepted the bribe. This event, known as the Cadaver Synod, was one of the most extreme examples of political machinations in the history of the papacy. On November 5, 1605, a group of English Catholics led by Robert Catesby attempted to assassinate King James I and blow up the House of Lords. The plot, which became known as the Gunpowder Plot, was the most serious threat to the king and the young Protestant state of England. While the plot failed and all of the conspirators were executed, it had a profound impact in English history. In the aftermath of the plot, anti-Catholic feeling ran high in England, and this would only serve to reinforce the religious tensions that had been simmering in the country for decades. Number 1. Mount Tambora. In 1815, the world's most powerful volcano erupted on the island of Sumba. The eruption of Mount Tambora unleashed an amount of energy equivalent to 600 atomic bombs, killing over 10,000 people and causing massive famine and crop failures around the world. The following year, 1816, became known as the year without a summer, as the eruption of Mount Tambora had caused such drastic climate change that the northern hemisphere experienced an abnormally cold and snowy summer. 5 crazy moments in history you won't learn anywhere else.